Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com.
You think there's too many adorable pets in need of homes? Well, we agree. The Animal Alliance wants to reduce the overpopulation out of pure, bleeding heart compassion. Check out theanimalalliance.org to help us spay and neuter those little heartbreakers.
Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today we have another incredible guest. Man, they just keep showing up, and I keep thinking, actually, I want to talk to that person. I want to talk to that person. I want to talk to that person. I feel so honored to be able to ask questions and be mentored by Fred Cary today. Fred Cary, he actually is a powerhouse entrepreneur and CEO of Idea Prose, a company that guides qualified entrepreneurs through the complexities and pitfalls of the startup world, which is, that's its own world in business. Is how do you get a business started? How do you get it off the ground? And how do you get the culture and the buy-in to make this thing a success? So super, super grateful for you, Fred. Another title that sometimes he gets called is the Dream Business Builder. So Fred, talk to us about, how did you start? I mean, we all grow up a certain way. What were the pivotal moments growing up that kind of led you down this path of becoming a business superstar?
Well, thank you for that introduction. It sounds like my mom wrote it, but most of that is true. Let me start at the end instead of starting at the beginning real fast, not to upset everybody's sync here. But the reality is where I am today is really no different than where any of you are. Even if you're just thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, you're just starting this journey, you don't know what you need to do first, you don't know what you need to do next. If you've made a few steps, I'm there with you. And even though I've started 10 different companies and have ownership in 400 companies that I work with now, I wake up every morning wondering what I'm going to do next. That's what the entrepreneurial world is all about. And it really started for me when I was quite young. In fact, before my memory, I was born and raised in Italy, American dad, Italian mom. And my nonna, when I was 3 years old, used to call me Il piccolo avvocato delle cause perse. And that means the little attorney of the lost causes. And so even as a child, I kind of stood my ground and I didn't try to be different. I was different. I needed to have my way, and not in a rude way. Just I had a really strong sense of right and wrong, and I carried that with me throughout my life. Now I don't know about you listeners, but I can tell you this, that I always kind of felt like an outsider. I never felt like I really fit in the mold of where you're supposed to be, even though I ended up becoming an attorney and got an executive MBA, international MBA, excuse me. I did that path kind of backward from the way people normally do it. And because I felt myself as being outside, I didn't really think that I would fit well working for somebody else. And so I kind of was almost forced to be an entrepreneur because I didn't think I would fit the corporate structure otherwise. So I created my own business. I created my own mentorship because I didn't have anybody else, and I studied, I looked at other companies that were doing well and trying to dissect what they were. As you can probably tell, I'm not really young. So when I did this, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet, we didn't have any real easy way to find all the incredible information that every one of you can find now. We had nothing. And so I did my work, I did my research, I kind of plotted where I wanted to go with my life, and I went there. I I started my first company, not including my lawn business, mowing yards and painting fences and washing dishes and babysitting when I was 16. I started my own first legitimate business at 22, and I haven't looked back since. I've started, as I said, 10 different companies. And every one of the things that I did is basically what you're going through today. A lot of desire, a lot of passion, a lot of imposter syndrome, and a lot of doubt. And that's what we go through when we're ready to start the engine, go towards that first turn, wonder whether we're going to run into the wall or not. I did that repeatedly, and I ran into a couple of walls, but I also had a great number of successes. Probably 80% of the companies I started went on to have successful exits, whether it was by going public, being acquired by public companies, or still being private, but being massive companies at this point in time. So the lessons I learned along the way in this process is that you're creating a new dish every single time you start a new venture, because what you're looking to do is something that either hasn't been done before, or it's not done the way that you think things should be done. So you're making a sometimes subtle but often dramatic shift in the way consumers or whoever your clients are going to be interact with you and what you have to offer them. So my advice here is, as I'm going through this process of describing my own history, is that it's never easy. And there's plenty of examples of people who gave it all and took years to recover from it and ended up being enormously successful. I mean, you study the guys at Airbnb. There's an incredible story. The three guys out of college, they went to design school in New Hampshire, of all places, and they end up in San Francisco trying to start a business because they didn't have enough money to pay their own rent. And they bought a couple of air mattresses, hence Airbnb, and rented them out on the weekend in their apartment. People slept on the floor on an air mattress in their living room. And they thought, wow, this could be a business. They couldn't even raise $150,000 at a $1.5 million valuation. There's no venture capitalist in San Francisco that ever believed that they could get people to let strangers stay in their home. And that's why they got rejected over and over and over again. They had a whole book full of credit cards that they maxed out on, probably 50 different credit cards that they were able to get between three of them. And they kept using them to fuel their existence in the beginning. Same thing you guys are going through. The past definitely repeats itself, especially in entrepreneurship. So when you're sitting there worried and you don't have a cushy ride to where you want to go, just understand you're on the bus with the rest of us, and it's a very bumpy road. It's not paved, and you have to pave it yourself, and you have to choose your direction yourself. The reason I point this out is that a lot of times beginning entrepreneurs will look at somebody who has a reputation, has a pedigree, and started several different companies, and they'll think everything is really easy, and they were lucky, or they worked really hard, and everything fell their way. I am you. We're the same. And we're all going through against incredible odds in order to make our dreams become realities. It's not easy, and it's never ending. People ask me, hey, when did you become successful? I don't know when that's going to happen. The measure of success for me is waking up in the morning, putting my feet on the ground, having a big smile on my face because I know I've done everything I need to do in my life. I'm never going to get there. And I promised my kids I'd retire by the time I hit 90. I might stretch that out a little further because there's a lot of work to do. So with all of you guys, if you're sitting there and you're a mom working at home or a dad working at home or a couple that is tired of working for the man, as one of my board of directors says, who, by the way, is the man, he's actually the CEO and president of Lending Tree. So, but he got sucked into being the man because he got acquired. But in any event, when you're thinking about making that move, make the damn move. It's not going to be perfect, and it's probably not going to work the first time you do it. You're going to have to change, you're going to have to adjust, you're going to have to figure out, but you can never quit. And that's how I got to where I am today. I never quit. And I have fires to put out now in the business I have now, in spite of how successful we're becoming and how many entrepreneurs want to work with us. Over 100,000 have applied to work with us. But despite that, every morning when I wake up, I have my doubts, my insecurities. I have to look in the mirror and tell myself, hey, you're going to be okay, man. Go do it. You can do this. I have to do that now. And so if you guys are worried about doing that now, don't worry about it. You're not meant to win. None of us are meant to win. We have to grab it and make ourselves win, despite the odds.
Wow. We should end there, except for I have so many questions that we're not going to. First of all, just thank you, Fred, so much for your awareness. Before the podcast, you said, who's the listener? Who am I talking to? Because I'm going to adjust this to talk to that person. And I really feel like there's very few people who actually have the ability to do that and the awareness. I meet with a lot of people, and it's very interesting. Once people start to achieve a certain level of success, they actually lose touch with normal life, or at least they don't think that it's worth talking about because they don't want to appear that way. But when somebody can come in like Fred and drop any level of ego and be real about, what do they struggle with? The idea of imposter syndrome is a fascinating thing to me because it's something that I don't feel there's very few people who don't experience it. I feel like everybody, once you, I'm gonna explain this in a different way. We haven't talked about this, but I'm just curious what your perspective is, Fred. But for me, the way I experience life is through a spiritual lens and through a God lens. And I believe that any level, like when I start to reach into that level of godhood and not a self-grandizing, but more of a collaborative, I'm a piece of a greater whole. There's the more and more success you have, it seems that there's a bigger and bigger recognition of how small you are of a piece of that greater whole. And so I don't think that imposter syndrome ever really gets better. You may have more confidence in ownership of your piece of that whole, but you're also very much more aware of how small of a piece you are in the whole. And so it's this interesting dynamic of, yes, you can create whatever you want, but you always have to remind yourself you're worthy to be part of the whole. And there's so many people who don't feel worthy to be part of the whole. I know for me, when I first experienced this recognition that I was not feeling worthy to be part of the whole, it was my second or third year in business, and I just wasn't experiencing that. I had come from another career where I was making over $100,000, went into a new career field. There's very similar as far as process and procedure and activities go, but was not as successful. And it was because I didn't believe I was worthy. Had some personal things I was working through. I'd recently got married, wasn't really feeling like I was worthy as a husband, as a new father. There was a lot of insecurities in other areas of my life, and those were translating into my financial life of like not feeling worthy there. And I wasn't aware of this until I got on a coaching call. Thank goodness somebody offered me a free coaching call for 30 minutes I was listening to a podcast, and they said, anybody who applies, I'll give 30 minutes of my time. And I was like, oh, I'm the sucker. I'll apply, right? Like I need help, So I reached out to them, and for 30 minutes, they went through, what are my beliefs about myself? And it got to the point where I was like, subconsciously, I didn't believe I was worthy. Consciously, I was like, of course I'm worthy to win. I was telling myself this, but subconsciously, I didn't believe it. And once they brought that to my attention, that subconsciously I didn't believe that, I was like, okay, well, I know how to program my mind. I went and created some affirmations and started brainwashing myself, cleaning out all the trash that was in my brain and putting in good, wholesome things that I was worthy to be a husband, worthy to be a father, worthy to be a businessman, worthy to be a servant to the people around me. And I just started telling myself I was worthy. And that act alone, I believe, tripled my income in the next year simply by changing what I believed about myself. So anybody has that option, and anybody could stop doing that. Like Fred, you could stop telling yourself you're worthy every morning, and you could start telling yourself you're not worthy every morning. And what would that do to your businesses and your life?
Yeah, collapse everything.
Right. And so no matter how good it is, it can all be gone if you start choosing to believe something different. And the coolest part about that is it can all become your reality if you choose to believe something different.
Can't handle the sad sight of homeless pets? The Animal Alliance is working to spay and neuter them so fewer are born into a life of pity. Visit theanimalalliance.org to join our mission of compassionate rejection.
So I'm so grateful, Fred, for your awareness and the way you presented that. I want to just highlight two phrases that you said, and then I'm going to start asking some questions here. But one of the things I don't want is to get lost in, and you reiterated it multiple times in different ways, but this one I love. Where I am is no different than where you are. Okay? All of us wake up every morning with the same opportunity. Some of us have a little bit more information about how to maximize that opportunity, but all of us wake up with the same 24 hours. All of us wake up with the sun. All of us wake up with our world spinning. All of us wake up. And if you woke up, that's success. You should be grateful. But then all of us have to make a choice about what we're going to do with our life. And that's the same spot that everyone's in. Fred is in no different spot from that perspective than you are. And you get to choose what you're going to do. So I want to just call that out. I want to go back to this phrase that you got told when you were younger, the little attorney of the lost causes. Can you expound on that? Like, I know it sounds silly. It was maybe a little quippy thing that you got told, but I think that there's a lot of people in our world today who don't grow out of that, right? They're still stuck. They're now 30, 40 years old, and they're protesting any side of the political aisle, any side of the world. Like, I'm not picking any sides, but like they all are worrying about, and this is one of the reasons I'm so focused on this podcast right now. What are good questions? Because I think a lot of people are asking questions about lost causes. Like, they're so worried about, they're distracted from their own life and creation by all the other things that they're the little attorney of lost causes. So go into more detail there about what that means in the context of your life, and how did that influence kind of where you're at today?
Yeah. And so my grandmother in Italy, il piccolo avvocato delle cause perse, the little attorney of the lost causes, I think she, in this particular case, meant it very affectionately, because I'd always stand up to my daughter, I was going to say my daughter, I have two of them. I was standing up to my father, who was kind of a bully, and I didn't back down from him even when I was little, even though I knew I was not going to get my way. And I think what Nonna was trying to say, that you're going to push what you think is right, regardless of whether you have a chance of making it happen. And that's kind of the attitude that I carried with me. It's not that I worried about those things. It's I worried about what was right or wrong, or what I was meant to do, or what I felt obligated to do. I refer to other people who are quite famous a lot of times simply because they've gone through the same journey that we go through. And Elon Musk, when he started both SpaceX and Tesla, and he's on interview, you can see it, he gave each of them less than a 10% chance of making it. Each of them. And in fact, at the end of 2008, he took the last $90 million that he had from PayPal and gave 45 to SpaceX and 45 to Tesla, and ended up sleeping on friends' couches because he had no money left. And it was the end of 2008 that he almost went bankrupt. But his reality is such that even though it was a lost cause, less than 10% chance of making it, it was so important to him that he was going to do it, even though he was the little attorney of the lost causes. And those lost causes are both highly profitable businesses to date now. And I think that's what Nonna meant. But we do get occupied with things that we can't control. And that's one thing that you need to avoid. 95% of what we worry about never happens, whether we can control it or not. 95% of what we worry, am I going to be a good dad? Am I going to be a good husband? Do I deserve this? The fact that you're thinking of those things means you're going to be a great dad, and you're going to be a great husband because you're worried about those things. It's the ones of us that go pompously throughout our lives, not worrying about any of that shows that we're not empathetic enough to care. And so if you have your own little lost causes, just pat yourself on the back and know that, you know what? I'm going to make this. It's going to happen. I am deserving, and I'm going to work my butt off until it happens.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for clarifying that. I wasn't sure what the phrase meant. I appreciate that it's a more positive phrase, actually. Like, what do you feel passionate about? What do you feel is important? And what are you going to work for no matter what? That I was on a call yesterday with I don't know if you know who Dan Clark is, but great world-renowned speaker. And one of the things he said on the call was he was kind of teaching a college course about public speaking. And he said, really, like, what I want to know is what would you be willing to drive 5 hours one direction for 30 minutes to share about for free? Like, that's what I want to know. That's what his college, he wanted their final project to be a speech about. Like, what are you so passionate about that you would go into debt, you'd do everything just to share this message with somebody? And it's worth it to share the message to a few people 5 hours away because you're that passionate about the message. You're not looking for anything in return. And I think that that's a good way to gauge life, and to at least a good question to consider. What am I passionate about? What do I really feel is an injustice or is something I could have a solution on? Because another thing you said in here was a lot of the reason you do something, like you're creating a new dish, and it may be a dramatic new dish, it may be just a subtle new dish, but the best way that I found to identify what should I work on next in my life is, well, what do I see as something that isn't working the way I believe it should work that I actually can make an influence on? There's lots of stuff in the world that I'm like, I don't like the way that works, but I'm also really grateful that politics is a good example. Like, I don't love all things about politics, but there's no chance you're going to find me in a politician's seat. Like, I have no desire, so it's like somebody has to do the job, I guess, like, do I agree with everything that's being done? No, but somebody chose to do that, like same with military. I'm so grateful for people who choose to be in the military. Like, I will do anything for you. Right. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that that doesn't have to be my lot in life. And it does not interest me. So I'm grateful that there's people who it does interest and want to do that. And I can just respect. Do I agree with everything they do? Not necessarily, but it's a lot better than if I had to do it. Police officers, there's a lot of these roles in this way. And I felt that way as a child. I didn't really like the way my parents parented me as a child. Now, as an adult, I'm so grateful with a new perspective. I'm like, man, my parents were rock stars. They did so good. At the end of the day, we were taught to be trusted, have integrity, work hard, like all the things that really matter in my life. One of the phrases that I had posted on our wall growing up was on an orange sheet of paper. And my second oldest brother told me that he learned it from my dad. I don't know where it actually came from, but it said, it's better to be trusted than loved. And some people are like, well, that sounds like a weird thing to tell yourself. But for me, it's like, no, dude, your integrity, that's all you have. Like, I would much rather somebody respect me and trust me than like me or love me. Like that stuff can come later. But like when you, all you have is who you are, and your character is who you are when nobody's watching. So it's like, what can people count on? So let's go again. When you say you always felt like an outsider, how did that affect at this point, you might say in some circles, you're the ultimate insider. You're part of 400 different companies. You're very successful. You are the ultimate insider. Explain how is that feeling like an outsider influenced how you interacted and maybe helped you develop skills that you wouldn't have otherwise developed?
Yeah, it's all about infrastructure, and it's all about support systems and connections, right? And if you look at the data, you'll see that, well, number one, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, right? All you folks listening to this show, whether you're just dipping a toe in or whether you're all in, you have $1 million company, you can't figure out how to get to the next level. We all want to be entrepreneurs nowadays. But if you look at the data, the entrepreneurs that are multimillionaires and billionaires that classify themselves as entrepreneurs, they all, for large part, went to very prestigious schools. Over 60% of them have advanced degrees from those schools. And they have professors that can pick up the phone and call any number of VCs in Silicon Valley and get $10 million for a paper napkin idea. The rest of us don't have that infrastructure. And that's the way I was as well. I didn't have that infrastructure. I didn't have those connections. I didn't have access to capital. So I really had to create everything from the ground up and learn on my own. I went and got an international MBA in Liverpool at what's called a red brick school. It's like a Ivy League school. I got that when I was 50, after I'd already had the company go public, and I went there just to learn so I could become more of a quote unquote insider, and learn some of the tricks of the trade. But you're always out there without a support system, without your safety net, trying to do things on your own. And that's precisely why I created Idea Prose. I mean, if you go to ideaprose.com, the first thing you see is the Become an Insider. There's a free membership that people get all sorts of inside information and free workshops a couple times a month and all sorts of things to provide them that kind of insider knowledge they need to have a better shot at going forward and making it.
That's interesting that you chose to become an insider when you felt like an outsider. So I like again, these are wording things that a lot of people will overlook, but it's tribalistic language. It's inclusion. It's lived experience. It's unique. You say, well, I've heard the outsiders, insiders terms before. True. But what's unique is Fred's story behind it, right? And everybody has their own story. And by Fred sharing his story, it allows you to share your story. And you can use the same words, but your story is different than Fred's, even though it's very similar. Probably it's very different at the same time. So I think that's interesting. Also interesting that at 50 years old, you went back to those schools to get a degree. I mean, were you going to get a degree? What was the real purpose? Was it just to build friendships? Was it to build connections? Like, what was the question that you asked yourself that the answer was, I should go back and get a degree? Like, I don't know. What was the question?
Imposter syndrome. I felt that I didn't have enough education to be doing what I'm doing, even though I was rock starring it with the companies I had and having big exits. I really felt like an imposter. And I thought, well, I should get an MBA. And the fact of the matter is, when I went there and took all my courses, half of the professors were telling me I should be teaching the classes. And here I am trying to get my degree so I can say I have one. But the reality behind it all is that I learned a lot. And I learned the kind of structural and business reasons why I made many of the decisions I had made in my career. I was always shooting from the hip, and I always did what felt right. But now I was able to put structure around what felt right and make that repeatable because I understood the business process behind it. So it was very valuable on several different levels.
Yeah, that's a fascinating observation. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, no, it wasn't it? Oh, maybe it was. Time flies. So I have been experiencing the world very spiritually, like I had kind of talked about before, and my understanding, the way I would describe the world and my experience in it in relation to others and feelings, emotions, all these different limiting beliefs, things like that. But I just kind of have discovered it. It's not something that I know where I was taught it. I don't know any specific book that I learned it from. I've listened to lots and lots of books. So maybe that's like, I'm sure I picked it up, but I'm very unconscious of how it is or the structure. I just, inside my soul, I know how it works. And then I have another friend who he's been very classically trained. And I'm going to say classically trained as from a perspective of he has all of the graphs. He can explain the structure of the mind, like all this very, very graphical and mathematical type of explanation around it. And then I have another friend who's really good at asking questions. And we all were sitting there talking to my wife, Charlie, and because she's still learning this, she's living with me, so she's seeing it, but I'm not the great at explaining it because I just experience it. So I'm like, I don't have the verbiage to explain it properly. And anyway, so we're sitting in this room in our house, and we're having this conversation, trying to help my wife understand these things. And what was fascinating was all three of us there were many times where when they were explaining a concept, any one of us, we all explained it like verbatim with the same exact sentence, like this is how we understand it. And we hadn't talked about how we understand it. It's just like, this is the verbiage of how to understand what's happening. So there's many times like that. But the one guy, his name's John Schutte, he has like all of the structure and he can draw it out and make sense of what's going on. And I was like, oh, that would be actually kind of nice to know all of the structure of it. Like I know it because I do it, but do I know how to teach it? And that's a whole nother element. And did I make sure I was on a podcast with Steve Rosenbaum, Rosenberg, 2 or 3 weeks ago as well. And I was like, how do you create the checklists? Like, you have all your checklists. I know what I do in the morning, but like, what's the methodology behind creating a checklist? And he's like, oh, you need to go read the Checklist Manifesto. I was like, okay, so I'm going to go read this book now to try and like figure out how to figure out how to do these things. Because although you might intuitively know something, for you to become a master duplicator of that, you need to be able to process it out and simplify it and make it something that you can transfer. And so I think that is a value in going to school or going and getting educated, maybe not at a Ivy League school, but getting educated nonetheless and learning the actual tactical rather than just the, hey, I know this because I've done it.
Yeah.
Great.
Exactly.
How do you duplicate yourself?
Yep, exactly.
So let's move on to this question. I'm just curious, having so many different business partners, have you found that one personality type is better for you to be in business with? I mean, 400 business partners, I have 11 siblings and we're all very different personalities. So I can't imagine that all 400 businesses or business partners that you have are all the same type of person. But I'm curious, have you found that some of them you align better with, you feel like you can communicate better with, like you get along better with, and then there's other businesses that you're part of, but you're just like, it's not really my thing?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of doing the it's not really my thing part because I'm obligated to work with them all. But what we went through hell here with COVID and different stock market issues and housing issues, and there are a whole lot of macro and micro things that have happened over the last few years to cause a lot of delay in a lot of businesses, stunted growth or strong pivots in any direction. And the people that I believe are going to have the biggest chance of making it, the people that work with me, are the ones that take ownership. Like if the world is on fire, they're not the ones calling me saying, hey, we're 3 weeks late in development. They're the ones calling me and saying, what can I do to help? I understand you must be going through hell. What can we do together to make this better? And so when you're ready to take ownership, when you're ready to persevere, when you're ready to look at every failure as an opportunity to go to the next step and learn, then you're going to make it. And those are the ones that I really, really bond with, because I know the ones I hand over the reins, they're going to go, and they're going to go hard. Others, every time you come to a bump in the road, they're going to stop and wait for that bump to go away. The bump doesn't go away. It only gets bigger. And so I would say that of the 400 companies that I'm associated with, it's going to be 20% that are going to make it. And not because the other 80% don't have great ideas. It's because they don't have the fortitude and the ownership required to make a company get through all those humps and get out the other side where they're becoming profitable and growing.
And when you say make it, do you mean by, again, I don't really know your full position as far as what the expanse of all your careers and the way you run your businesses, but are you more operating from almost like, I'm going to use a popular term, like a Shark Tank type thing, where you're an angel investor, where you're coming in and you're your venture capitalist, or are you more partnering on a deeper level where you're actually creating businesses just because you want to create a business and you have partners?
Yeah, well, you can think of us more like a hybrid venture studio where we have a flagship product, but now I have all sorts of other very inexpensive or free offerings as well. But historically, we've only had one flagship product where you're somebody, you have a great idea, and you don't know what to do next. And they'll come in, we'll actually partner together, we'll become a co-founder with them, and they'll make a contribution to the company. It's typically around $100,000. It's not cheap, but it's about 20% of what you're going to spend to do this all on your own, from the idea stage to a nationwide launch. And then we'll spend the next year and a half working together. And my team does everything, all the heavy lifting, the research, the strategies, the app creation or engineering, if it's a physical product, everything that needs to be done to go to launch. And meanwhile, we're training you how to be a kick-ass CEO of your own company. So we're creating people and products and companies through that process. So that's what we do, and that's, I'm like father to 400 companies, and whenever anybody has a complaint, I can imagine with 11 kids, but take that 11 kids and multiply that. I have them screaming and pulling up my pants all day long. Yeah.
Ever feel like your heart just can't take seeing so many homeless pets? The Animal Alliance understands your pain. We're on a mission to spay and neuter to reduce overpopulation and prevent the heartache. Visit theanimalalliance.org to support our efforts.
So with that, what's a typical, with that, are you taking ownership, like equity splits on the companies? And because you're putting in the majority of that effort and potentially the upfront cost, are you taking a majority share or are you taking a minority? Like how does that work? And is there eventual like buyout periods? I'm sure it's different with each company, but just kind of generalize this for us, mostly for education. So people who are starting businesses or thinking they want to start a business, they have an general understanding of like, what does that look like if they were to go get a business partner?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're an unusual beast in the sense that, here's somebody contributing 100,000, they're saving themselves 400,000 and 4,000 mistakes that they're going to make along the road. Well, we take like 25 to 30%. And I've had people say that to me, why aren't you taking a majority percent? Because you're doing all the heavy lifting and it's your connections that are going to give access to capital afterwards when they're ready to launch. But that's the way we do it. And we're counting on that entrepreneur to grow enough to become a leader and to build a big organization that we can exit from at some point. So it's very much kind of a venture studio type play. But I found that for the last year, I didn't take any new partners because what we were doing was broken. And it was broken in the sense that we had, as I said, about 100,000 applications, and we could only help 400 people. And that's because there's so much heavy lifting involved. But every one of those 100,000 people fashioned themselves as an entrepreneur that needed help. And we just didn't have little bits of help. We just had this big all-in thing. And so now, over the last year, I completely compartmentalized everything. You need help with funding, we'll help you. If you need the initial research to figure out what your strategy should be and whether this is a good idea and how to execute it, we can help you. On those lines, different little components of what you need to do. If you just need help launching, we can help you. So we broke up all these little packages to try to help the majority of the 100,000 people and more who want to work with us.
Yeah, I think that would also create a filter of those people down to who's the real serious 20% versus who's the people just starting. And I think that there's value in the whole thing. I guess I didn't say it on this podcast, but I really believe that my purpose in the world, or one of the purposes of the world for me, is to exist in light and love and to create this creation through that energy of light and love. And there's other individuals who feel that they're best suited to create this same type of creation, but from an energy of motivation rather than inspiration. And you need both, right? Different people are at different stages in their business, and there's not like right or wrong. It's, hey, how do we approach people where they're at? And that's something that, just like Fred did at the very beginning, he said, hey, who am I talking to? How do I approach them where they're at? So I appreciate that. Who would you say is your, let's do one of these time-wise. Okay. What's been, out of all of the projects you've worked on, businesses you've either built by yourself or now these other projects, what's been the most interesting and like fun project that you've worked on, or maybe two or three of them if you can't choose between one?
Well, in hindsight, I'd say the most fun was mowing lawns when I was 16. Okay. I had a lot less pressure than anything else I did after that. Most fun was assuredly a company I had called Concerts America. It was my second company. I was 25. I was doing concerts for the biggest bands in the world at the time. And so that was fun, but I was lucky I didn't die. But as far as in kind of more recent history, I think that one of the best things that I had was a company called Voxel. And I don't know that I would say fun, but it showed me what you can do if you have grit and determination and never want to give up. Because when I started Voxel, it was right after eBay. eBay was kicking butt, growing really, really big, and I thought there could be two players in that space. And so we had an auction company, we had better auctions, we had better items, and we just couldn't catch them. And we had investors that had invested about $8 million into the company at that point. And I had a big obligation to them, but I was at the point where we're going to have to close shop. And instead, and I encourage all of you guys to do the same, I looked at where I was. I looked at why am I here? Why did I pick this industry? There's something about this where I can make a difference. And maybe what I'm doing isn't going to make a difference, but there's got to be something else. And so I looked at it and I discovered that the technology hasn't caught up with auction and bidding and reverse bidding and bid or buy and incremental bidding and automated bidding. None of that was there. And so I turned Voxel, instead of shutting it down, I turned it into a technology company. And within a year, we had an offer of $125 million to acquire us, a company that just a year before I was going to turn the lock on and shut down.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And the Phil Knight story, it reminds me of that with the shoe dog, where it's like they were in the book. I don't know how much is real versus just dramatization, which is fine. Both are great. But in the book, he's like, man, there was IRS people. I was going from room to room to avoid getting arrested. The day our company's going public and all of our bankruptcy and everything is like, we're backdated. We should be literally going to jail because of mismanagement or whatever. We're going public and turning it into a multi-million-dollar company. It's like, you have to be willing and have the guts. I don't know, let's call it guts. You said grit, to push the company to the edge, to just be committed to the process. And I love that, step back, reassess your why, and where else could you add value? Maybe the way you're doing it isn't the way to get value, but a small pivot, a repositioning. You can stay in the same industry. You can use your same skills. And I think that's an important lesson for many people who aren't yet entrepreneurs, but are working in a career. Those skills that you have, they're valuable in another vein, another vertical, and learning how to transpose those skills you got trained on and turn them into your own business or your own income stream. That in and of itself is a skill that part of it's a skill. Part of it is what we started this conversation with, believing that you're worthy of that, rather than having somebody else tell you your worth and this is how much you're worth and your skills are worth that. Stepping outside of somebody else telling you your worth and stepping into, I'm going to go claim my worth. That's that's a mindset shift. As much as it's a skill transposition, it's also a mindset shift. Can you talk about that? Going from that mindset, and maybe you've seen more people. It sounds like you kind of always have been this way, but maybe you've helped other people through that transition. What are some of the things that they need to know as they go through that?
Yeah, fundamentally, and we talked about it in the very beginning here, what does success look like? I stated, basically put your feet on the ground in the morning when you get out of bed and smile, because you're happy doing what you're doing. So I think you're spot on when you say, find your why, find what you're passionate about, and see if there's a business opportunity behind that, because then you're working on what you love. And you're getting paid on what you love, and you're helping others because of what you love. That's really instrumental in what you're doing. But I would add another component to this as well. And this is the way I've done it. If you look at my history, you'll think, wow, this guy's a schizophrenic business person, because I've been in almost every industry you can imagine. What I always look for is opportunity. And then I figured out, how could I fit into that opportunity? In other words, I'm looking for a market that's growing rapidly, still young, still robust. There's competition in there, but they're not doing things right. So there's a hole. There's a hole in the donut. There's a hole in the space, because why is that going to make me have a better chance of success? The market's proven themselves. The customers are there. The customers are complaining because of this hole that's not being fulfilled. And if I can find my expertise, my why, and use that to fill that hole, I'm going to have a much better chance of succeeding. So find the sector first and then see how you fit into it. But always look for a growing opportunity with a major hole in it. And then you have a much better chance of getting there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a big part of what you said but didn't say is you have to know you. You have to, once you identify you, then you can actually start to look at anything and see, how do I fit into that scenario? It could be, how do I fit into bottled water? How do I fit into painting? How do I fit into lawn care? How do I fit into a tech company? Because once you find you, this is another like life-changing moment for me. I will never forget where I was, Orem, Utah, State Street, turning on 800 North. And I was listening to the audio program, You Were Born Rich by Bob Proctor. And it clicked for me that nobody else in the world, nobody has my lived experience and perspective. Nobody, even my own siblings, like I mentioned, there's 11 of us. We all came out of our childhood. We experienced many of the same events, but we all experienced it differently. We all perceived what happened differently. It meant something different for each of our lives. Nobody, doesn't matter how much money you make, how little money you make, how much fame you have, how little fame you have. Nobody has the same lived experience as you. And when that clicked in my mind, it was like the biggest, like, okay, then there's a me in here. I need to find out who I am, and I can go into any industry and make money. I can go add value in any area because I know my value. And that's a crucial thing there. So,
hey, let me ask you a question.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, ask it.
11 siblings. How many of them are entrepreneurs?
So I believe all but 2. And the 2 that are not entrepreneurs, one, he's brilliant. Like, I think our youngest brother, I believe he's, I don't want to say, maybe he's probably one of the smartest kids in our family, like just absolutely brilliant. And this is maybe so I know it's something that he kind of resents or feels sorrow about, but by the time he was growing up, my parents were done parenting, for lack of a better word. And so there wasn't a lot of high expectations. And so although he's brilliant, the drive didn't get taught as much. And so that kind of has turned it into, he just loves being a mechanic, very creative, and he just loves working on cars. So that's what he does because he loves to do it. My other brother, I think he has an entrepreneurial bug, but chooses to not he chooses to have a job because that's what the family dynamic would prefer. So he chooses to be employed. And then my other sister, she has multiple businesses in real estate, and she tried it. She did a bunch of different stuff, and she loves working for Cracker Barrel as a waitress. But I think what's really important about the answer to better answer this question is, all of us operate our lives, even when they're working for the man, as if they're the CEO of their life. So they're going in and saying, hey, I'm here. I'm operating as if I'm a contractor entrepreneur inside of this business, and I'm going to demand payment the way it is. I'm going to propose things. Like, we all operate like entrepreneurs, even if some of us choose to do that inside of somebody else's organization. I think the mindset of every one of us is very much entrepreneurial. And that's another highlight. You don't have to go take all the risk if you don't want to. There's a thing called an entrepreneur, and those are just as valuable. Like, if you would rather go and develop yourself inside of somebody's organization where not all the risk is on you, there's still a lot of those same skills that are employed, and you need good entrepreneurs in your business. Right?
Yeah, it's funny. In fact, there was a recent research that was done on employers, and they were asked why people leave the job. And I think something like 82% said, well, because they're looking for better pay. And you ask this, not necessarily the same employees, but you do a similar survey for employees and ask why they leave the job. And it was because they didn't feel respected. They didn't feel that they were given the autonomy that they needed. So the entrepreneur word that you just used, I think is really important. That if you are a boss out there, make sure that you let your employees really shine and find their own way to do things, because now you can have a bunch of mini organizations inside your company that will operate a lot easier. If you look at Amazon, is a perfect example. Why the heck did they create AWS? This storage infrastructure system had nothing to do with Amazon.com. They created it because somebody in the organization thought of it. And there's a policy in Amazon where you can't say no. That if you're a supervisor and you get a great idea from somebody, or any idea from somebody, for you to be able to say no, you have to write a thesis on why you said no. You have to write at least a couple of pages of why this isn't going to work. Otherwise, you have to say yes, and it has to go up the food chain to be something. And that's what happened with AWS. Nobody could come up with a reason to say no, even though they wanted to. And so AWS became part of Amazon. And I think right now, it may actually make more money than Amazon.com, which now only makes 38% of Amazon's total income, shockingly.
Yeah, that's insane. I just think that's a good practice, and it's probably something I could do. I appreciate you bringing that up. Literally last night as we were going to sleep, fading in and out, I was talking to my wife about how I feel like I could be a better dad. I could be more intentional about the time that I spend with my kids. And sometimes I find myself maybe correcting them more than I should, and just like allow them to be kids. And there are definitely some times where my initial reaction is no, just because I don't want to deal with it, but I have no other good reason to say no, other than just like, I don't want to deal with that right now. So I think that this is a very poignant thing, came right at the end of the episode. I'm so grateful that we got to it, because that was for me to hear. Could you write a paper on why we're saying no right now? Is there a reason you're saying no to your son, or is it just because you're lazy? That's anyways, that was for me. And I really appreciate that, Fred.
Okay. I'll send you a bill.
Yeah. Hey, well, we've gone over our time, but I so appreciate you. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, can you share the website again? It's Idea Prose. Is it ideaprose.com, or where are they going?
Yeah. So if you're an entrepreneur, want to be an entrepreneur, if you go to ideaprose.com, the very first thing that you're going to see is an opportunity to become an insider, completely free. You click on it. I'm going to send you, for the first 7 days, I'm going to send you a different tip every single day on what it takes to launch a successful business, and about a 20-minute video of me talking about each one of those 7 things. And then we have a weekly newsletter that covers different subjects every week, and 2-3 times a month we have these free workshops, couple-hour workshops, teach you how to raise capital, how to market better, how to really understand how to resonate with your customers or your investors or whoever you need to resonate with. We also have all sorts of other programs that you can pay for if you need more help than that. So ideaprose.com, free member. The other place they can learn more about me is at fredcary.com, Cary. You can follow me on Instagram at official Fred Cary. As I said, I have over 500,000 followers there, and I provide personal development and entrepreneurial advice every day. And finally, if you got some kick butt idea and you're ready to go big, just write to me, fred@ideaprose.com. I'll talk to you and either help you or direct you somewhere so you can get things done.
I so appreciate you and your service and your willingness to share your life experience to me first and foremost, and then obviously to the audience. But I just am really grateful for you. I'm grateful I took your call. I'm grateful I saw the opportunity to speak with somebody like yourself. So thank you so much.
You sound like an awesome person, and I'm really, really happy you're so concerned with being a better parent. I have 2 daughters now, 31 and 23, and I raised them both by myself. And doing that as a CEO of 10 different companies in the process. So there's nothing more important than I did in my life besides that. And I'm still doing it, by the way. They never leave you. Just a little clue for your future. But it's been a real pleasure, and I appreciate you and your audience. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here.
Awesome. Hey, we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy show.
Take care.
Do you wish there was fewer pets in shelters, tucked tugging at your heartstrings? The Animal Alliance is on it. We're spaying and neutering to ensure fewer pets are born into a life of suffering. Visit the Animal Alliance to help us save our bleeding hearts.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.